The point of working isn't to be busy. It's not just to fill your time with things. The point of work is to accomplish things. And I'm betting that with whatever type of work you do, you have things that you want to accomplish. Maybe you run your own business and you started it for some specific reasons. Like you wanted to have more flexibility, you wanted to be your own boss, you wanted to have more time to spend with your family and to be in control of your own schedule. My question for you though is your business really doing that for you? Is your business giving you more flexibility, more control, or is it taking those things away from you? Is your business giving you the lifestyle that you really want, or is it consuming your entire life? As I've built my own business, there have been times when I was really frustrated with how long some things took that I felt like I had to do. It seemed like I could never get to the end of my to-do list because every single thing on it took me so long. Well, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some ways that you can get the most out of every hour that you spend working so that you can grow your business and reach your goals as quickly and easily as possible with as little time invested as possible. If you want to get more done in less time, then the first step of the process is clarity. You need to know exactly what you're trying to achieve. Now, of course, most of us think that we know what we're trying to do, or else we wouldn't be doing it at all. But oftentimes we get caught up in the process and we focus on things that are a little bit too small and specific instead of the big picture of what we're really trying to do. So for example, as I'm trying to build my business, I can get caught up in a specific marketing campaign or creating a specific product and lose focus on the bigger picture thing that I'm really trying to accomplish with my business, which is to provide a good income for my family and to give myself that lifestyle that I really want. You have to get clear on your focus. Now, beyond that type of clarity, once you know what you're trying to achieve, and always coming back to that, always reminding yourself, then there's the type of clarity of actually knowing what you're working on right now. Now, it's important that this comes second because your projects won't help you get to those goals if you don't know what the goals are. But once you're able to do this second, then getting clear on the actual projects is really important. It's so easy to get caught up in busy work, to just be checking your emails or making lists or planning all day, when in reality, you really need to get some specific things done. And that leads me right into the second part of the process, which is strategy. You know what you want and you need to create a plan for how you're going to get it. What are you actually going to do to reach that goal? Because it doesn't matter how much you want it or even how clear you are on what it is, if you don't have a strategy for how you're going to reach it, then you will most likely waste your time on a lot of things that won't actually move you forward. Once you've created a general strategy and you have an idea for maybe a lot of things that you can and you think should do in order to reach that desired aim, then you need to get clarity on what your prime mover is. The prime mover in your plan is the thing that more than anything else is going to move you forward towards that goal. So for example, with running my business, one of my biggest goals is to actually spend time with my family. And so one of my prime movers is actually to stop working after I've worked for 20 hours each week. If I don't do that, then I can't achieve that goal. Now, one of my other goals for my business is to increase our profits and to make more money every month. And so in order to do that, I really need to focus in on what we're doing to market the business, because that is the thing that the more I do that and the more effectively I do that, the more money we make. Because that is the thing that the more I do it and the better I do it, the more sales we make and therefore the more money we make. And then within the category of marketing, there are of course specific tasks that I need to do that also have the biggest impact. So for this step of the process, you need to look at that plan that you created, look at your strategy and circle the things that are the prime movers. There shouldn't be very many of them. In fact, I would say that for every goal you have for this work that you're doing, you should really only have one prime mover. And then part two of this part of the process is to cross out other things that are the least important, that would just eat up your time and really take you away from that prime mover. Because think about it, for every minute or every hour that you spend on something else, you're going to not spend that time on the thing that could be having the biggest impact. And this is really one of the most important parts of this process, because if we're trying to get the most done in the least amount of time, we have to eliminate the things that are eating up our time. Otherwise, even if you use the other parts of the process to get more done, you won't be doing it in less time. You have to cut things out if you want to spend less time on your work. The fourth step of the process is flow. So, what is flow state?
In positive psychology, a flow state, also known colloquially as being in the zone, is the mental state of operation in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in the process of the activity.
So basically, flow state is when you get really in the zone, you're really into your work, you're not being distracted by anything else, you're being insanely productive, and you're really enjoying it. When you're in a state of flow, you're more productive, so you're able to get more done for every minute that you're working, but you're also able to work longer because you're not distracted and because you're enjoying what you're doing. So if you want to get more done in less time, and if you want to get more done overall, it's really important that you figure out how to get into one of these flow states. Now, you've probably experienced a flow state before. It can happen while you're doing just about anything. You might be in a flow state while you're doing your work, or while you're reading a book, or while you're doing the dishes, or while you're on a walk. It's where you just get completely immersed in what you're doing. So you forget about the flow of time and you just focus on the flow of your work. Now, different people find that different things get them into a state of flow, and there could be an entire video on flow state or even multiple videos, but I'm just gonna touch here real quickly on a few things that most people find helpful to getting into a flow state. The first one is something we've already talked about, and that is having purpose or clarity about what you're doing. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing or what exactly you're doing, you're going to find it difficult to get into a state of flow. Second is challenge. Most people find their work the most interesting when there is an element of challenge. They're not doing something that is too easy or too mindless. Now, I mentioned earlier that you could get into a flow state when you're doing the dishes or going on a walk, but chances are it's not that you are so engrossed in doing the dishes that you get into the flow state, but rather that you get lost in your own thoughts. So your thoughts are interesting you. You're thinking about something that is interesting or challenging, and that is why you get into the flow state with the manual work that you're doing. The next step is really important if you're trying to get into a flow state, although you might accidentally get into a flow state without doing this, and that is to eliminate distractions. Now, the reason why you need to make sure that you do this if you're trying to get into a flow state is because if you start to get into a flow state and then something distracts you, it's gonna immediately bump you out of that flow state. It's kind of like if you're trying to fall asleep and then something wakes you up. It makes it harder to get back to sleep. So if you are trying to get into a flow state, you need to make sure that you put your phone on silent, that you really focus on the one thing that you're doing, because those distractions will pull you out of the flow state. Once you get into the flow state, you can sometimes ignore those distractions because you're so focused on what you're doing. But it can be a good idea to have your phone on silent and have eliminated those other distractions ahead of time, because a big distraction will still pull you out and it can be hard to get back into the flow state. And the last thing I'll mention right now that you can do to get into a flow state is to work on your schedule. Now, this is very different from one person to the next. What will work for one person won't work for another. Basically, what I mean here is twofold. One part is, when do you work the best? Some people find it easiest to get into a flow state first thing in the morning. They get out of bed, they immediately jump into their work, and they are able to completely focus on their work and really get into it very deeply. On the other hand, some people need a lot of time in the morning to warm up, and it is late at night when they are able to get into a flow state. They really get focused on their work, they have a lot of creative energy, and that's what works the best for them. So that's the first part, figuring out when you work the best, when it's easiest for you to get into a flow state. The second part of schedule is how long your flow state sessions typically are when they're the most productive. Some people do really well with getting into very short spurts of flow state. So what I mean by that is they decide to focus on a task for just a few minutes, or at most perhaps 30 minutes. For people like this, using the Pomodoro technique, which involves setting a timer for 25-minute increments, working with extreme focus for that period, and then taking a 5-minute break, and then repeating, works really, really well. Now, on the other hand, some other people find this to be completely disruptive. It would be the worst thing possible for them to interrupt their flow state at that 25-minute mark. It might be a little bit more difficult for these people to get into the flow state, but once they get in, they can work for hours. If this sounds like you, then you need to make sure that you do everything else you can to get yourself into the flow state as easily, but then work for as long as possible. And that leads us right into the 5th step of the process, which is in fact schedule. Regardless of whether or not you're trying to specifically get into a flow state, finding the times that you work the best and allowing yourself plenty of time for each of these sessions is imperative if you want to get the most done in the least amount of time. When I first had kids and I was trying to run my business and be a mom at the same time, I thought, well, my kid's happily playing there on the floor, so I can just sit here on the couch and get some work done while they're playing. But the problem with that was that for me, I do not do well with very short work sessions often. And so the fact that I was trying to work for a few minutes and then I would be distracted by the baby and back and forth and back and forth meant that my work took absolutely forever. Work that I could have gotten done in 4 or 5 hours lasted all day, from the time when I first got up until when I went to bed. It was exhausting and very inefficient. I later realized that getting in those 4 or 5 dedicated hours, even if it meant waking up a couple hours earlier and working until my child woke up and then working a little bit after they went to bed, was far more productive. It meant that I got to spend the entire day with them without being distracted by my work, so I was able to actually be fully present while getting just as much done. The very final step of this process is simply to rinse and repeat. Now, you don't necessarily need to repeat all of these steps in sequential order, but the main thing I want you to focus on repeating over and over again is coming back to clarity. You need to constantly remind yourself what you're really trying to achieve and why, and then after that, move on to strategy. How am I going to reach that goal? Because if we don't continually come back to those things, then we can find ourselves becoming distracted by all sorts of busy work that will eat up our time and diminish our results. That's all for now, but I hope you're having an amazing week, and I'll see you again next time. And so that's where we'll add that graphic. It says Prime Mover, maybe like over the entire frame or something.
Picture of Optimus Prime, and then he's moving.
Yeah, you can just move Optimus Prime across the screen.
Yeah.
Engrossed in doing the dishes does not sound very good. I feel like I'm really grossed out about doing the dishes. I am completely engrossed in these dishes.